Welcome back to Analytics, Big Data, and the Cloud. And joining us now is one of the keynote speakers of this event for today, Jurij Paraszczak, and you're with IBM.
Indeed.
And you were here talking about smarter cities.
I was.
Doesn't seem from your talk, in case people have had a chance to hear it already, that our cities are very smart right now.
They're not now. Interestingly enough, a number of them really realize that, and they're sort of trying to figure out what to do about that. The big cities like New York are publishing all kinds of efforts to engage the academic and engineering communities. And many other cities are really seeing this as an economic development opportunity.
Is it difficult for cities to come up with the financial means to make this work?
Shall we say that's an understatement?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But I think what you have to start off is do something small, where you can see the return on investment, where you can see where the low-lying fruit is, and start digging away at those problems.
Well, you mentioned low-lying fruit a few times. Perhaps you can tell us the context that you were saying it in.
Oh, sure. I mean, for example, I gave that a very simple example of cities that dig up roads several times over by different agencies. That's clear low-hanging fruit right there. If you look at another example, it is, if I could only understand where my traffic was really going on a day-to-day basis, I might be able to reroute it in a more efficient way. You know, if I understood what people really wanted to do in terms of energy usage, I might be able to reduce the amount of energy I provide. There's a number of things. I think in general, cities can be quite inefficient simply because they don't have the data, they don't have the analytics around that data. Really.
Is it's not there, or they're not? I mean, you mentioned the smart part. It just seems like when you're talking low-hanging fruit, why does a road have to be ripped up 4 times? You know, why do these things have to happen?
Well, they happen because groups are in stovepipes. They adopt the processes of their stovepipe and they go with their process. And nobody's decided that, hey, just because something's going on in one stovepipe, I should be connecting it to another. There's nobody with those kinds of analytic skills that can connect that together easily. I mean, you could easily do that by having the agencies sit together in one room and say, hey, Joe, I've got this going on, what have you got going on? They could do that. But most of the time, these agencies are running, fixing problems that somebody's raised to them. They don't have the time even proactively to figure out what to do in the future. What they're doing is fixing the crises.
You say that the only time, from your experience, that agencies actually get together and work together is under an emergency. Right.
And that's simply because it's a time where people all understand there's one common issue to be dealt with. And it's an issue that just cannot be ignored, and it's one that they emotionally respond to. So the barriers of process, the barriers of ownership fall down, and they just say, let's go get this job done. And that's the first place where they understand the value. Well, I shouldn't speak down, they know about cities much better than I do, but observation is, it's one of the first places where they begin to understand how this interaction can really help.
You know, the interesting thing is you mentioned that they finally come together, and often they all get criticized afterwards for not performing to par.
That happens.
Which is interesting because they've never had to respond to an emergency like that before.
And nobody's got any real metrics. The criticism cities get are sort of point criticism. If there was a way to analyze how did the city behave against a specific problem, and have metrics against it, then you can't really argue. You can say this happened or this didn't happen and have a structured way of analyzing the events. But today there's none of that. People just ping at one particular issue, and often, for example, the squeaky wheel gets heard first. And sometimes cities spend money on things that are driven by the squeaky wheel, not what is necessarily most important to them.
Well, is part of the problem we've got some experts as far as city planning goes and the like, but the cities are also run by politicians. People who you look at who might be capable and well versed in their field of expertise. But you know, one thing that always sort of gets under my skin is when they say, well, our politicians should be paid this much because they're running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. My response to that is they would never be given an opportunity to run a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Some might you know,
not. And so you're looking at that when you've got the trained professionals and the politicians. That's got to cause some of the problems.
Indeed. But sometimes it's in the end, it's the politicians that take the heat, Today we don't have a method of ascertaining how well the system is behaving. All you know is something happened, and then who do you blame? You blame the politicians. So you can't blame them for having the kind of response they have, which is it's a gut response. If people had the tools, if they had the data, if they had the thing presented in a cogent, clear way, they could make decisions. Today they don't have, and so all they do is, in general, because they're so stretched, they respond to problems, not proactively to figure out what to do to prevent those problems.
Right. We're going to take a quick break for a minute. We'll come back and we'll talk about areas where you think cities should start when it comes to becoming a smarter city. Don't go away.
Very good.
Business happens fast. Clients expect immediate responses. A great way to build rapport? A custom rapid video response using Skype. The Fused Logic Rapid Video Response program will immediately separate your business from your competition. Here's how it works. Step 1. Identify a marketing message you want to share. Step 2. Contact Fused Logic. We will help you pull together your rapid video response script with key messaging. Next, our Fused Logic TV team will do a test call with you to check your Skype account, sound, and lighting in your office. We schedule a recording date and time and produce your rapid video response video show. Here's an example.
Hi, this is Rob Penby of June Warren Nichols Energy Group. I'm here to announce a new product.
Don't wait. Call Fused Logic TV today and create your cost-effective rapid video response.
Welcome back. Again, our guest right now is one of the keynote speakers, Jurij Paraszczak with IBM.
Yep.
So we're talking about smarter cities and how many cities are not that smart right now. Where should they start?
I would say, first of all, try to find the critical problem you think you have in the city. The next is go find the data. Sometimes what we find is getting the data is not so simple. So a collaboration between the city and a local educational establishment or university where you can send out students that just go around with a clipboard and start pulling the data. You know, I remember at one time we were talking to a city in Chile. And what happened, you know, Chile had a pretty bad earthquake about 2 years ago. And after everything had broken down, the only thing that city had was people with clipboards and a mayor and a radio station. And that mayor went out on that radio station every day to explain to everybody exactly what was going on. And in the process of sort of disseminating data, and got volunteers to go and figure out what was wrong where, because you couldn't even drive around the roads. And once they gathered the data, they could figure out what to do. That lady is a heroine of that city today.
So why is it our cities aren't inclined to go out and do that sort of thing?
They've never had to. Cities in the past have had a fairly reasonable income. They've been able to run the cities by silos. Because,
what do you mean by silos?
Well, for example, a silo that deals with road repair, a silo that deals with traffic, a silo that deals with steam or energy. They all do their own thing. You know, garbage removal, waste disposal. They do their own thing because that's how they've always done it. So what happens is when you reduce the amount of money that a city has, they have to start thinking about efficiencies. When you start thinking about efficiencies, you can do it in a number of ways. You can basically just go take a cut and then let things land where they may, or you can do that, intelligently. And once you start doing it intelligently, you begin to see where the disconnects are in what's going on.
What about the citizens?
Yeah.
What is their role in this? Because they're paying the taxes.
Oh, yeah.
And they're the ones that get frustrated, or they're the ones that get the new community center.
Right.
So what is their role in all of this?
I think it's more, first of all, what citizens should be doing is really explaining what they want in some sort of structured, cogent way. I mean, it's impossible for a politician just to respond to one individual, but somehow we need to provide an approach that allows citizens to explain, in some ways, what they want. Because they should know that most city mayors, most city agencies want to be able to communicate with them, to be able to explain what they are doing. In the same way, the citizens need to find ways to communicate back. Now, you know what's interesting? You look at most cities, and they may have a website, they may have an RSS feed that people can subscribe to that tell you what's going on, what the events. Some cities really try hard. The fact is, barely 1 or 2% of the citizens actually subscribe to any of this. Most of the time, the citizens have enough stress in their life to just focus on what they want to do, and the only time they want to deal with the city is when they have to. We need to find a way in which what citizens do, what cities do, communicate in a way where information flows freely. I'm not sure actually, to be honest, exactly how to do that yet. I know in the experiments that we've done where we sort of provided competitions for the citizens to act on things in their home, which would then be transferred to the city, that's kind of worked. We know, for example, if we give citizens ways in which they can communicate, for example, do they want to use less energy or do they want to have better comfort, like a thermostat that tells you how to do that, that's a way in which they can communicate. But by and large, most citizens, their lives are pretty stressed as it is, and unless there's a problem, they won't communicate.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because obviously there's a disconnect between the politicians and the planners to a certain degree. But the citizens, I mean, here in our province, Alberta, it's funny because voters are being given a pat in the back because 1 out of 2 bothered to show up at the polls, which is better than the 4 out of 10 that showed up last time.
Right.
So if people aren't getting involved, then I guess we can't expect a really fast change with the system.
No, I mean, change only happens through stimulus, right? By and large, the status quo is what stays. And unless there's a stimulus of stress or benefit, you won't see any change.
And I guess the thing is there seems to be a reluctance sometimes to make change when it comes to cuts. As you say, it's low-hanging fruit, which could be removed probably quite easily. I guess, how do we convince people that this is low-hanging fruit? And
you start off with something small. Just do a small project of some kind. For example, perhaps you could show citizens that you're managing road repairs in such a way that's mindful of their road usage. Suppose, God forbid, that you remove those cones that don't really have to be there and explain that that's what's going on. But really what you really need to do is you need to start off with some small project that just demonstrates to the citizen what you're doing and how that's improving their quality of life.
We had one recently here where they lowered the speed limit in a number of neighborhoods to 40 from 50 kilometers an hour. And then they tried that for a few months and then implemented it in the ones that wanted it and the ones that didn't. So is this a good way to show the city is interacting properly with the residents?
It's certainly one way. And you know, especially if it's shown that the residents are having an impact on what the city is doing. That's the most important thing. If citizens don't feel like they have an influence, they won't feel like they want to interact with the city. So what you describe is probably a good example of that.
And like you say, it's a small example, someplace to start.
But it's the small things that provide a route to the great things. I think most cities will not, for example, they'll not invest in some big project unless there's money to do that, unless there's a critical need to do that, unless somebody's really telling me it has to get done. And so it's, you know, you have to start off somewhere small and build upon that, explaining to the citizens, hey, look, this is what's going on, and keep the drumbeat up. It's not easy. None of this is easy.
Right, and especially when a time when money is at a
premium.
Yes, absolutely.
It is.
Jurij, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Don't go away just yet. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more soon.